Hey guys, Blocktrain here with another bi-weekly crypto recap. I'm sorry I actually skipped two bi-weekly recaps after my first one. It was just because, I'm really getting to the stride of things right now. I'm hoping to have a new video up every day. That might not always happen, but every 2 days you should expect a video. And I will definitely be more consistent with my bi-weekly recaps. So that said, let's get right into what happened from around March 28th to now in the crypto market. So I have the Bitcoin USD graph right now, and I'm I actually think this is a really critical moment for Bitcoin, just or the crypto markets in general, because they all follow Bitcoin. Because if you look out right here, if you look back in time, the lowest we've gone in this year in 2018 is right here. It's around $6,350. Now, we were very close to approaching that point, which is around 6,600. And I think if you zoom in a little bit, the lowest trade made was around 6,400. So really, we basically reached the bottom that we also reached in February in the past week. And I think because we've reached that bottom from February, but we've since managed to recover up to 7,400, we've come back down to around 6,600, 6,800. I actually think this is really critical just because from here, if we see sideways movements over the next week or two, or maybe even 3 weeks, I think it really shows that Bitcoin will have found the bottom and that, 6,300, 6,400, that's really the lowest that the market is willing to accept, because anything under that, there will be support there. But for now, we've only had about a week of sideways movement after pretty high drops from 9,000. So I think for the most part, there's almost no chance of a bull market coming in the next week or two. That seems really optimistic and unlikely. I'm sorry if you guys don't like to hear that, but that's what I think. But I do think that if we can manage to sustain the price over this 6,300, 6,400, support level that we reached last time, and we see some solid sideways movements for the next couple of weeks, I think there will be some more stabilizing in the Bitcoin's price. And once the price stabilizes and people are more confident that, hey, we're not in a bear market anymore, we're, more in sideways movement, the market is really waiting for some big news to come in, then we might be able to see some bullish action. This isn't, I'm not some financial guru. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but this is what I think. I think the support level from February is a pretty important point to be looking at, just because, again, that was really when, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general just went straight off the map, went straight down, and then they recovered from there. And we've been kind of having a gradual decline from here. And really the question was, how far are we going to decline for? And of course, nobody knew that answer. But 6,400 is a really good benchmark to look at. If it goes below that and stays below that, that could be a really bad sign for Bitcoin, going forward. But, if it fluctuates like it has been doing for the past couple of days, from 6,600 up till 7,000 over here, it's 7,400 down here, back to 6,600. That's just regular sideways movement, still pretty volatile for, compared to a stock. But, it's Bitcoin. You all know what you're getting when you get into it. So, for Bitcoin, pretty stable in this past week, not too volatile, and hopefully we'll be seeing more of this, more sideways movement. And if we do, then we'll really know that Bitcoin has found its bottom. For now, we don't know, and we'll just have to see. So now let's get into some cryptocurrency news. Now, one of the biggest pieces of news in this past week was the Mt. Gox CEO. His name is Mark Karpeles. Not entirely sure how to pronounce that. He went on Reddit and he didn't ask me anything post. And basically what he said was, hey, I know people don't like the way we dealt with the Mt. Gox issue and the fact that people were stealing funds and we were insolvent. We didn't go about it in the right way. But, the really key piece of information has almost nothing to do with what he said, and really has to do with the funds that were missing. So if you're not familiar with what happened in Mt. Gox, it happened in 2014. Basically, it was the biggest exchange for Bitcoin. Think like Coinbase, but worldwide, for Bitcoin at that time in 2014 when, the price was still relatively low. But they had like hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins. And they didn't realize over a time period that hackers had gotten into their wallets and were slowly siphoning away about 500,000 Bitcoin, which is an insane amount of money, even when the price was at around $100 to $1,000. Way less than it is right now. But what's really kind of mind-blowing and really seems unfair to me is that basically around 90 million of those Bitcoins, or well, a lot of those Bitcoins were recovered. I think about like 2 billion or something of that amount. Don't quote me on that. But, a decent amount of Bitcoin were recovered. Most of them were lost, but there was still a substantial amount of money in the Bitcoin that they did recover. And about 91 million of that went to creditors, people who were like, hey, I put money into Mt. Gox and I would like that money back. And so 91 million was all it took for all those creditors to be paid off. Now, what about the rest of those Bitcoin? Basically, what Mark Karpeles said was, yeah, basically me and this other guy. So in this Ask Reddit, if you go down here, and I think this is really important, he says this: Mt. Gox has two shareholders, T-Ban 88% and Jed McCaleb. T-Ban has only one shareholder, who is Mark, and I'm not really sure who the other guy is, but basically these two people get the remaining 160,000 Bitcoin that the Japanese government decided would go to the shareholders of Mt. Gox. So to just put this straight to you guys, this guy messes up the Mt. Gox, exchange, doesn't realize people are hacking them, tries to cover it up, gets arrested, goes to jail for a year, and then when he comes out, they say, okay, we'll give you 160,000 Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, which is upwards of $1 billion. Now that's just ridiculous to me, and I think it doesn't make sense. And Mark actually talks about this in his original post, and he says, I don't like this. I don't like the fact that I'm rich, but this is really just some first world type of bragging, in my opinion. You can't come into this Reddit post and say, hey, yeah, so I screwed you all over, but I'm rich now, so ha ha. That's not going to happen. So I don't really trust what he's saying here. Maybe he's going to come back and give away Bitcoins to creditors who claim their Bitcoin from Mt. Gox, people who haven't been credited. But I don't really understand how that would work, how he would verify that. And I really don't know if Mark will actually do this, if this is just some virtue signaling. Not saying he's a bad guy, I don't know him, but from how Mt. Gox was handled, it doesn't give me the most faith. And what's a little scary is that it says here that the users have been reimbursed due to the fact that all creditors would receive the value of their Bitcoin holdings in Japanese yen, not Bitcoin itself. So what that means is Mt. Gox has essentially been dumping just because these creditors, $91 million, were given the value of their Bitcoin in yen, not in Bitcoin. So to get that yen, you have to sell that Bitcoin. So essentially, people have been blaming Mt. Gox for these past, 3-4 months for dumping Bitcoin and really contributing to the bear market that we've been in. Nobody can really say if that's true, but it does seem as if, Mt. Gox Bitcoin has been dumped, and that may have played a role. I think this is just something interesting and also could potentially shed some light on what exactly is happening with this bear market in these past 4 months. Sure, a lot of it was due to, kind of people who didn't know anything coming in hoping to get rich quick and selling the minute the price went below where they bought in. At the same time, something like this, 160,000 and probably a little less than that for these creditors, but still a lot of Bitcoin being sold from Mt. Gox, and it's really following the Bitcoin market from 2014. It's really just a plague on the Bitcoin markets. And the Mt. Gox crash, guys, it was the reason for Bitcoin's crash from 2014, and it really never recovered until this 2017 high. So that's just something you guys should know about. I think it's important that you guys understand what happened in the past to, kind of see how things will play out in the future. And you definitely should be looking at Mt. Gox and the Bitcoin that they hold and what they're doing with it, because they are a confirmed whale. We know that, we assume that price action, if you have that much Bitcoin, if you dump enough of it, price action will happen. The price will go down if you dump enough of it. So it's definitely something to check out. So the next thing I want to talk about is Vitalik Buterin, the creator of Ethereum. says Ethereum apps are being screwed by scaling. So apparently at this D-Economy conference, he was going to talk about his 12-month vision, but he ended up talking about scaling. Now, what I really like, even though what he says is pretty pessimistic, which is, hey, if you wanted to make an actual real application, real decentralized application on the Ethereum blockchain, you couldn't. We don't have the TPS necessary. At the same time, I do think it's cool that this problem is really coming out into the forefront now because, scaling is really such a buzzword that's been going around for the past year. We can handle 10,000 transactions per sec. We can handle 5,000. We can handle 1 million. And the truth of it is, you don't know how many transactions a blockchain can handle until they do handle that amount. Which is to say, hey, a lot of coin teams, dev teams are saying, we can handle this many transactions. And yes, that might be true, but where they get the numbers from their testnet. And testnets, as useful as they are, they don't give you all the information that you need. They don't account for all the way that bad actors can act. And I think it's cool, though, that scaling is really coming into the forefront because, even though there's a lot of claims coming out about the TPS they can handle, Ethereum, which is the second largest blockchain in the world, and its creator is saying, hey, we haven't solved this problem, but don't worry, this is next on the list. And it's cool that that blockchain has gone to that point where there's enough functionality in Ethereum that people can build these decentralized applications. They can, play crypto kitties, it's all functioning well. We just need more transactions. So this is really what's coming to the forefront, and I'm excited to see what Vitalik Buterin has in mind. He has sharding, proof of stake, all these things in the work. Maybe a mix of proof of work and proof of stake. And we're really going to see from this year on, I think, new and inventive solutions to scaling while trying to keep the true decentralization that something like Ethereum and Bitcoin have. So I think this is something to just be wary of for this next year or two, just because scaling is one of those things where if any platform wants to be big, you have to solve scaling. But at the same time, if one team manages to solve the scaling problem while also having the necessary infrastructure to keep decentralization, true decentralization in terms of no one person, whether it's one node, the number of nodes you have, whether it's the number of people controlling most of the nodes, like Bitcoin, where Bitmain has essentially not a monopoly but intense mining power compared to a lot of other mining pools. So I think if there's a way to keep true decentralization while having increased scaling, that's basically just going to be what everybody else will use. So it's not like every team has to have a different scaling solution. It's that every team is working towards the scaling solution. And once that scaling solution is found, blockchain as a whole will just flourish. And I think that's really great to see. We'll just have to wait and see. And I don't think anybody should really be approaching the scaling problem as if it's unsolvable, even though we don't know how to solve it right now. So the next bit of news is that Verge had a 51% attack, and the Verge network just completely got screwed up by this hacker. Now, essentially what happened was there was a way to mess with the timestamps. You could set a false timestamp. So this guy just made an incredible amount of blocks and just reaped the rewards of making all those blocks. And what Verge did was they pushed a hard fork. And I don't know if you guys know that much about Verge. If any of you guys are Verge, Verge holders, I'm sorry that this happened. I've been seeing a lot of denying within Verge communities, but I really think this isn't one of those things you should be burying your head in the sand for. I think you should be really getting out in front of it and trying to find out what's happening. And as far as I can tell, the Verge team is really trying to downplay this. They said it's a small hash attack, when really it's the worst case scenario for what can happen to a blockchain, which is a 51% attack. So they used a hard fork, but once you initiate a hard fork, that brings up a whole new slew of things you have to do, which in terms wallets, all different functionality that works with the original chain now has to be compatible with the things you've been using before that. So it's just a lot more work for the Verge team, and I'm not going to come out and say outright that Verge is, a bad project or anything, but I do think, you should be wary of holding Verge when something like this happens, and the team themselves don't come out and say, hey, this was our fault, our bad, this is what we're going to do, this is our plan. I think that would be the professional and the right thing to do for an ICO project that has a lot of people invested into it. Overall, I think this is just a bad thing for the cryptocurrency markets, especially because Verge is so popular. And I really hope that the Verge team will stop trying to minimize the problem and just tell everybody who's holding, this is what happened, this is how we're going to fix it, we're sorry for what happened. So next up on the list is that Wall Street. I just thought this was interesting. I don't know how much of an impact this will actually have on the crypto markets, but it's interesting to see what people see. So Wall Street Bitcoin bull Tom Lee predicts massive outflow of crypto before tax day. So tax day is on April 17th. Yes, if I'm correct, April 17th. So basically what this guy is saying, Tom Lee, he's saying, look, tax day is on April 17th. Now, a bunch of people have been trading Bitcoin for this past year. They've been buying, they've been selling, they've been moving into altcoins. And when it comes to the United States, every single transaction you make has to be taxed based on, profits or losses. And so what he's saying is, because tax day is in the near future, April 17th, people are actually cashing out their crypto holdings just to be able to pay off that tax. And he's saying that is contributing to the bear market that we've been having right now. Is this true? Again, nobody can really say, but I think it's an interesting thing to know, and it pins April 17th as a date that you should be looking at. Kind of like how you should be looking at 6,400 as a support level point. I guess you should keep in mind that April 17th could be a pretty big day for cryptos if what this guy is saying is true. So next up on the list is that Japan proposes guidelines to legalize ICOs. Now this is awesome. And this is something that I've been expecting for a little while, which is just because in the past, 8-9 months, ICOs have been banned ever since they came out first with Ethereum, towards the beginning of 2017. That's really what started this cryptocurrency boom. It was the altcoin boom where people were making ICOs and so many people were investing for these huge gains. And it kind of continued on until it culminated in December. But over that period of time, ICOs have been banned over and over by different countries. And it makes sense why, just because, they're completely unregulated. A lot of people got screwed. And there are a lot of scams out there. There's a reason why the stock markets are regulated. But it's good to see that, these new countries are really, not new countries, sorry. Countries like Japan, Korea, China, and even the US, they're really looking into the technology. And I expected somewhat, sometime this year for countries to come out and say, hey, this is how we're going to be dealing with ICOs. And it's cool to see Japan being one of the first to say, hey, here are the guidelines for what we're going to be doing with ICOs. And for the most part, they have, know your customer verification, no insider trading. Basically, they've kind of, I guess they're adopting rules from the stock market, which makes sense just because, the two are so similar. And yeah, it's just good to see that these countries are getting ahead of it. They're saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. And I think if enough countries come out, then it'll be a really good sign for the crypto markets, heading towards a bull market. Because Japan is one of, the biggest countries for cryptocurrencies. And for them to say, hey, we're going to be allowing ICOs legally in the future, that's a big deal and could signal a lot of institutional money coming in. So now let's just talk about the market cap and just look at the markets as a whole. I just looked at Bitcoin at the beginning, but I want to look at the markets as a whole. I think for the most part, it's pretty good just because by comparing Bitcoin to altcoins, you can kind of see what exactly is happening with the markets. Because in my mind, at least how I think about it, is that when Bitcoin is going down to a degree where it's significant, altcoins follow almost in the exact same pattern. For example, when we were seeing these insane losses in the late January, early February, every coin was down. And when you looked at their graphs, on this right side right here in core market cap, they all look the same. And if you don't remember, or if you haven't watched my last bi-weekly crypto recap, I talked about how I thought it might be a pretty good sign that some altcoins were starting to break away from Bitcoin, that even when Bitcoin was going down, some altcoins were going up. And I still think that's a really good sign just because, when everything goes down and all the graphs look the same, everything follows Bitcoin. When Bitcoin goes down and other alts are doing well, it shows stability and faith in the crypto markets as a whole. And that's what we're seeing across the board today and for the past week, I think, in my opinion at least, where, things like EOS, they're going up. All these graphs look somewhat different. They don't follow that same pattern anymore that they used to. There's somewhat of, a hump right here where Bitcoin goes. Of course, they all follow Bitcoin to a certain extent, but, there are really some coins that are breaking away, like Tron. Or, yeah, I guess Verge, but, not really. Ontology as well doesn't really follow that graph. So some still follow Bitcoin, of course, but just seeing alts break away from Bitcoin's price movement, in my opinion, is such a good sign for, sideways movements that's going to come. And like I said, we're really going to have to see in this next week, and I'll be monitoring it, and I'll be talking about it in my next biweekly recap, just to see, where the Bitcoin or the crypto markets and Bitcoin in specific are going within these next couple weeks. I think this is a really pivotal moment because of that 6,400 support line that we found in February. So that said, that's all I have to say for today, and I will be back next Tuesday with another bi-weekly crypto recap. Please keep in mind that when I make these videos, I actually record on Monday nights and Thursday nights, and then I post on Tuesday mornings and Friday mornings. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, please leave me a like or a subscribe or a comment. Of course, that's not required, and I just love making these videos just for the hell of it. But, it's always nice to, be supported, I guess. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you guys have any suggestions, please let me know.